All right, so welcome everyone to the Akron Software Craftsmanship Meetup. We're a group that meets just about every month on the third Thursday. We are kind of focused in all things revolving around software development and sort of like polyglot or agnostic. So there's no specific stack that we aim to have content about or anything like that. It's just wide open. Even project management and process of software development is all fair game. My name is Mark Harwood. I'm the organizer of this group. I work at Robert Half Technology, which is a really big staffing firm. So they are the sponsors of it. So very quickly, if you are in the market for a new IT position, or if you are at a company and are in need of talented individuals for either projects or to hire full time, please find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to talk to you and attempt to help out in whatever way that I can. Also, my specific job there is managing an internal team of software developers. They're full-time employees of Robert Half. They are our consultants. It's a lone staff consultancy division. We focus on business web apps and data warehousing. So if anyone's in the market for that, please let me know. A couple of things I wanted to mention. I'm really big on community and collaboration. So once David gets going, I'm going to be dropping invites to both the Cleveland Tech Slack and the Canton Tech Slack in the chat. Both of these are tech-oriented public Slacks that you can join and connect with other people in the Northeast Ohio area to either talk about tech or talk about literally anything else that's safe for work. So yeah, I'll put the invites in the chat. While David's presenting, feel free to like unmute and politely interrupt him to ask a question or start a conversation about whatever he's talking about. Or if you don't want to unmute, you can drop a question in the chat. I will unmute and politely interrupt David, and yeah, we'll get your question answered. So oh yeah, last thing. Usually when we're meeting in person, we meet at the Akron Bounce Innovation Hub. It is a co-working space that is really, really cool in downtown Akron. We will be returning there in the fall to do these things in person once I work out like streaming to YouTube and still getting everything recorded so we can upload it later. But yeah, Bounce Innovation Hub, if you're a remote worker and you'd like to switch your scenery up a little bit, go work with either coworkers from the area or just random people, I highly advise you to check out Bounce Innovation Hub. They are the bomb. All right, I think that's all my things. So I'm going to now introduce David Egbert. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other for like 6 years or something. And yeah, I asked if he would do a presentation for my meetup, and he was kind enough to agree to do it. So he's going to be talking to us about giving web apps some native touches. So David, I will hand it off to you.
All right. Hello and welcome. I appreciate all the folks who are bravely keeping your cameras on. If you're on the fence about leaving your camera on, I do enjoy seeing people's faces when in meetings and giving talks. But if you need to turn it off, and that's totally understandable too. However you want to participate would be great. Also, do feel free to stop me and ask questions. You don't even need to be that polite, because before I was a software engineer, I was a public school teacher in middle school and high school. So I'm used to people like not really paying attention and like yelling and throwing things at me. So you can interrupt if I'm going too fast, or you had a question about a thing, or want me to go back on a slide, or scroll up on some code that we're going to look at briefly. Yeah, so that's that. Let's get into it. So my name, as Mark has already said, is David Egbert. My current job title is full stack developer. I've been living in the Python React world for the past 5 years. I was a Java full stack boot camp student back in January 2016. I worked at Explorus, which became IBM Watson Health when I got out of the boot camp. Although I did work for 3 days on a contract that Mark got me for my very first job out of the boot camp while I was waiting for interviews and things to come through. So I did like move around a WordPress image thing for some sort of jewelry advertisement. So, you know, diamonds are forever, but a 3-day contract is not. So that was actually my first job, was that 3-day contract. Then I got the job at Explorus, which became IBM Watson Health. Then I moved on to OnShift, and now I work for Repay. They're headquartered in Atlanta. Their tech office is Phoenix. I joined up with them about 6 months before, maybe 9 months before this whole COVID quarantine thing happened. So we were doing remote already, kept doing remote when, you know, it was mandatory. So that's me. For the folks who are in boot camps, definitely join those tech Slack groups that Mark's gonna add in. There's a jobs channel that's good, but mentorship channel, like it's a good place to hang out and get connected with other people who are in the tech industry in Cleveland. So, all right. So what are we talking about? We're talking about making software. So I knew that this was a language agnostic meetup, which means let's talk about JavaScript, because we all end up having to write JavaScript if we want to interact with browsers, unless you're doing some crazy like WASM stuff. I don't know. I've looked into it. Seems to be like a thing that could happen, but isn't there yet. So anyway, we need JavaScript if we're going to be doing mobile. So that's what I'll be looking at. In the JavaScript I know is React, but the stuff I'll be talking about later is really vanilla JavaScript, and you can use it in whatever JavaScript framework is your cup of tea. So here's statistics. The little line graph. The green is mobile. As you can see, last 2020, it was going to surpass desktop as the most traffic, and then 2021, you know, it was weird. So diverged a bit there. But basically, if you're going to try to get software through the web to people, you know, mobile devices are a thing. So how do we do that? How do we get software to the people when so many of them are now using their mobile devices? There's some options, and as with everything, which one you should choose, you know, depends. And each one has its you know, positive attributes and some negative attributes. And so you got to kind of choose what's best for your use case. So one thing, so like native apps, this is what I'm talking about. Native apps is when you go to Google Play Store or the App Store and get an app there. It's native app. They are fantastic with your mobile device in terms of having full access to, you know, the camera and any other hardware that the phone has. Some of the downsides of native app is that you have it's a complicated development process. You have to, at the minimum, you have to have 2 different build processes. So even if you're using something like React Native or Ionic or Xamarin, so these are tools that like basically you write your code in one language, and then the idea is that then they barf out Android code and barf out iOS code. So even though they abstract some of that iOS and Android specific stuff away, you're still going to need to build for both. And then a lot of times those frameworks don't have all the features you need, or you still need to tweak. So then you'll end up still having to do some stuff with your iOS code or your Android code. The other thing that is a big drawback, especially if you're working on like greenfield projects or proof of concepts, is that customers need to continue to download your updates. So, you know, if you release some software and it's got bugs, or it's just kind of a MVP, doesn't have all its full features out, like the customer needs to pick that up. And then also, at the same time, if customers don't get your updates, you need to be backwards compatible, or else the older apps are going to break, which when you're trying to, iterate quickly, especially on early projects, that might not be the best time to start with a native app. So web apps, on the other hand, you have one code base, you have your backend written in whatever, and then, you choose React or Vue or Angular or some other flavor of JavaScript, and that's it. And it works on a desktop computer, it works on a phone, it works on a tablet. One of the other bad things about native apps is the gatekeeper of Apple and Google. So they can kick you out of the App Store. Probably not a problem unless you're doing stuff that maybe you deserve to be kicked out. But the other thing, as a gatekeeper, they take 30% of your money if you are doing in-app purchases, which I used to be a middle school math teacher, and 30% is a big percent, is what I know from my time then. That hurts. Like 100% of your money is way better than 70% of your money by like 30% or so. So that's another big problem with the native apps. Problems with the web apps, though, is that you don't get access to all the great hardware features. Your performance isn't going to be as good on a mobile device. You have to you have to do a bunch of work to make sure it's going to look good on different screen sizes. So it's going to look different and behave differently on Safari versus Firefox versus Brave versus Chrome and all that. But being able to drop out with web apps, like when you're working on a new project, like you can keep releasing. You can release every day, and those new features are immediately available to the user when they reload the page the next time they visit your website. So that's pretty cool. So this third category, progressive web apps, is something like over the past year, I heard mention. Our product owner was talking about how we were going to change our mobile app into a progressive web app. And I started doing some research on this and trying to figure out more like what exactly is a progressive web app. And it is a very slippery definition that seems to change depending on what year, like the website that you're reading is talking about. The basic idea is that it's a web app that can be installed on a mobile device and kind of behaves like a native app, like sweet. And so I was like, this is the best of both worlds. Like, I want to do this. I want to make progressive web apps. The only problem is it's not quite there. Using progressive web apps is not fully supported by Google and Apple, and they're the ones that control your mobile phone. So a lot of the features that make progressive web apps really appealing, they're like not available on Apple. So, and sometimes only partially implemented on Google. So it's not like you can make a progressive web app and tap into your iOS like new features like their new infrared stuff, that LiDAR stuff, and do some cool like 3D animation stuff. And the other thing that's a problem with these progressive web apps is that they're not widely used, and so you'd have to do a lot of user education in one way or another to get folks to be able to go to your website and then press the right things on whatever browser they're using to save it to their home screen, and then start using it from your home screen and understand that that is kind of the flow there. We'll talk a little bit more about those. So, well, if web apps have their benefits and native apps have their benefits, why not just build all the things? And that's a great question. And if we lived in a world of infinite resources and time, then I would definitely recommend that. But most projects and most companies don't have those. So eventually you might get to the place where you're working for a company like, you know, Facebook or something, and or later stage startup, and they have a ton of money, and they do have a team that's doing web apps and native apps and stuff like that. But generally you have to kind of, figure out with the cost and the time and the scope of the project, where's your best bet. So I ended up spending a lot of time during quarantine building out personal project, and like every time I went to learn React Native, I got super frustrated when I ended up like in the Xcode and the build process, and that was frustrating, and I didn't want to learn 2 whole languages, and I wanted to really just get better at React. So I decided to spend my time and time resources building a web app. And then when I was learning about progressive web apps, which have all these features, which is very complicated, I discovered that you don't actually need to do all of these things to get the things that you want from a progressive web app. So I wanted to make a QR code scanner, and I didn't think that was going to be possible, but it is. You don't need you can get a QR code scanner in your web app. So that was nice to find out. So I started down this kind of other pattern. So I'd kind of think about features that I wanted that seemed very native-y, very, very much like, oh, I've done that on an app. I like that user experience. I want that, but I don't want to make a native app. And there's better business reasons for not wanting a native app other than like, I didn't feel like learning React Native on my spare time at that particular moment. But that was my reason. So I kind of went on the pattern of like, okay, build out a feature, put in the native touch, and then make sure that if the native touch piece isn't supported, or someone's using a device that isn't supported there, then have a fallback so that they can still succeed, so that whatever the feature is will still work. So, all right, this will probably hopefully make a little bit more sense if it's not with a quick demo. Okay, so I was making this thing that, can you all see?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I was out with my wife before the pandemic times, and she had got this thing in the mail from Destination Cleveland called the Cleveland Brewery Passport. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. So she got this thing, Cleveland Brewery Passport. One of her friends was doing it. And so all of a sudden we were going to all these breweries, which was great for her because she likes, to support local breweries. it was less great for me because I don't drink and I find breweries really boring. So, and generally they have bad food, but you don't notice it because you're drinking the beer. So I was like, well, this sucks. There should be a passport for like shit that I'm interested in. Like, Cleveland's got great restaurants. Where's the Cleveland restaurant passport? So obviously, the thing you do when presented with a situation like this is to go home and write code for a couple months, which is what I did. So I was like, screw your passport. My passport's going to be way better and digital, and nobody's going to use it. But that's all right. I'm going to learn some interesting tech along the way. So that's what I did during the pandemic. And it was great because not only could I spend a lot of time building this, nobody would use it because they weren't allowed to go to any restaurants. So that was fun. But one of the things I was going to try to do was invite my friends to go. So I sent this invite to Mark at halfbob.com, which that's the official website, right? Mark, did I get that right?
Yeah, you were close.
Okay.
Really, really close.
Right. So I need to make sure that he gets this invite. So I'm going to use this, share icon. And this is just, my regular, this is just Safari. And it would be great if it did this. And because I know Mark loves Slack. So check this out. And then boom, and then I send it to Slack. So using the share API on a mobile app, so this is a web app, and you get to use the share API, which is way better than just like copying a link and like, hey, copy this link and send it to a person. Like everybody uses that share API on their phone. They're super used to it. They know what this icon looks like. Oh, of course. That's so that's use the native time. But what if we are on on our computer and we want to send our invites? Okay, well, we still need to be able to share it. So we have to have a fallback. So not as great as the share icon, but use your phone instead of a computer next time, I guess, is the lesson learned here. But I can send him a link or an email. I can copy it to a clipboard and send it to him, whatever. So yeah, let's look at the code for that. And this is what's great about this. So the pattern, just like I kind of talked through, the code is basically exactly that diagram. Like, hey, try the native feature. If it doesn't work, then do the just regular web app, normal type thing. So that's just a little helper, is mobile. So that there's nothing really special going on in that library. It's just checking the header information that comes on a request. So, and that just speeds things up so that I'm not even bothering to check if it's supported, if it's not a mobile device. So this navigator.share is the function that's called that then brings up that native sharing functionality that we saw in the first part of that demo. So if it's a mobile and if it's that, then I'm going to do the share data. And then, oh yeah, definitely make sure to have professional logging messages and always log to console, like a pro. And then, so basically, if that's possible, then do the sharing. If it's not, then I do the other modal, which is just this. So if that sharing API isn't available because they're on a computer or on some other device that doesn't have it for whatever reason, then it goes here. And so that's kind of just the basic pattern to follow with these features. So another one that I mentioned was the QR code. So my idea was like people would go with their brewery passport, and instead of getting like a physical stamp, they could scan a QR code and show that they've been there. And like this, the QR code would be, you know, maybe on their check, on the restaurant check, or a little placard or something. Is the idea there. So you would go to the restaurant, and once you're there, be like, okay, ate my meal, it was fantastic. Now I need to get my stamp. So I need to open up my QR scanner here, make sure that you allow that. And now we have this, and we'll like do that and enter into like the 300th dimension, which is always fun. But then we hit the QR code, and boom, we got the congratulations. And what's great is a thing like scanning a QR code. There's, you know, a little bit of logic to that, and you might not want to do it, write it yourself. So they have libraries. So I'm sure, you know, Angular and Vue have their own QR code libraries. It's really not that complicated, but the pattern is the same here. So basically, let's see here. All right, so you saw, you know, that start scanning button. And so then it started the scanning by turning the scan on. And then so once the scan was on, then the QR code reader comes up. And it just kind of handles the errors for you. So it attempts to scan. If there's an error, it reports this out for you. But all it's really doing is the same stuff that I did, but using this, like, you know, oops, using the barcode detection.
David, what did you use for the confetti animation?
Oh, I just found an animated GIF. So yeah, it was way easier than I thought it was going to be. I was like, how am I gonna like make this celebratory? Like I need some great thing. And I was like, I could just get an animated GIF with confetti. This will be real fast. This doesn't need to be that big of a blocker. So this library just abstracts that away, but it's still the same pattern, right? So I didn't implement a fallback on here, right? So what if, all right, let's undo the stamp. What if we said no? Okay, right? So right now I just have like, hey, check your permissions. Let me use your scanner. So ideally, I would have underneath this start scanning button, I would have a text input and say, enter the secret password, because each of these barcodes, so this QR code is just 2 words, is what it's encoding. So in the admin, the QR passphrase is this. So I just generate 2 random words here, and then save them as the passcode. And then that's used here to pull up. So this is like my thinking was like a server could use this in case they forgot to print it or whatever. They could just pull up the website, go to vagabongo.com QR, and then put in the passphrase, and they could have the passphrase written down somewhere, and then pulls that up. So ideally, on the users app, there would be like, oh, you don't let me use your camera. Hey, enter in the passphrase. And then you could put in Kodak guess, and then you would still get the stamp. So I just didn't implement that, but that would definitely be a way to kind of do the backup there. So showed it with the share API, and this is it's on the roadmap. Don't worry, it'll be in V2. And what was the other one we were going to look at? Oh, GPS. Okay, so with like the QR code scanner and the share and like another one I implemented was like contact picker, so that you could like just add people from your contacts when you were adding. Amazingly, when I click on my phone, it's not working. All right. Right. So rather than just typing it in to a web form over and over, you could click a button that picks your contacts from your phone's contact, but it's only supported on Android, and I don't have Android phone available at the moment. So how I did that one, I took a kind of a different approach where it was totally a nice to have, and I only show the contact picker form if it's available. So I have this variable here, supports contacts, and so that's a Boolean, and if it's false, right? So if it's true, then I'll show the contact picker and do that sort of, and allow that to happen. And if it's false, it just doesn't show up at all. So it doesn't render. So on my iOS device, it's not available, it's not supported, so I can't do it, which I should have taken some screenshots of the Android thing, but it's similar to the share API. Like you click it, and then you can add as many friends as you want and drop them in, which is way nicer than having to add them one at a time here. Okay, let's see where we are. Demo, we looked at some code. Let's pause there. Let's pause there for a few questions before I kind of go towards the wrap up. Any questions on anything I showed?
What was the name of the library you're using to detect the platform? I think you showed it at the beginning there. It's React something, React mobile something, I think.
Oh, that, sure. Which one?
Device detect, there it is. Line 2.
Yeah, and it just is handy. It saves you from writing some boring code. When a user sends in a request to your website, that they send all sorts of useful information along with that request on like what browser they're using, what device, and it's a common enough thing that's been solved, so you might as well just use the library for it. And this one was pretty nice. It had a lot of things just that you could just use, like is iOS, is Mac OS, so you could just dial it in and not need to write any of that, and kind of keep it moving.
David,
oh, sorry.
My bad. Real quick, is there any way you can tell when using a PWA that it is a PWA? Like, I'm trying to think of if I use any unknowingly, and I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I can think of like people who use DoorDash, but not the native app, it still feels really mobile-y. So do you know if DoorDash is like, if I go to DoorDash.com on my phone, are they running a progressive web app?
So the thing with like progressive web apps is like, all right, say you buy you know, a Chevy Cavalier, a 1997 Cavalier, but then you keep buying pieces of a Ferrari from a junkyard and keep replacing it one by one. Like, at what point in time is your Chevy Cavalier a Ferrari? Like, if you keep adding progressive web app like features, at what point in time is it a progressive web app? Like, that's what's so you can make use of all these things that improve performance, that give it a more native feel. One of the things that like kind of is that seem to be a defining point of progressive web apps is saving it to a phone's home screen and then using it there, and then having like an app shell that's very like native appy, even though it is just a website. But really you don't need that to still be able to use some things that are really powerful about a progressive web app. Like, so one of the things that like service workers are now like are supported out of the box when you use the Create React app, which is like the easiest way to get going building a React app. And what those service workers allow you to do is implement like a cache first strategy, which means like all your static assets are saved to the user's browser, which means if they have shitty internet connection, it'll pull from cache first and just look and be really snappy, just like when you pull up Spotify. And like Spotify's got tons of stuff on the app, and like, but it's still pretty fast because they use a lot of your cache. And the same thing can happen with these web apps. So it's hard to know like at what point something is like gets that stamp of on a progressive web app. There's a Twitter Lite apparently that's popular-ish that people put on their phones, and other things like that. So, and then there's like the real bare bones progressive web app. So if you create a new React app using Create React app, and then don't change your web manifest document, you basically have a progressive web app. And Apple, who does not support progressive web apps and kind of wants to block them, created a React app for something, I forget what it was, recently, and then released it to the world. And then this guy who was a big progressive web app fan was like, Apple just fucking made a progressive web app. This is hilarious. I'm gonna put it in my blog. So you can be from accidentally you made a progressive web app to very intentionally, I'm going to use as many of these different features to get as best performance and try to support all of these cases to make sure that my mobile app or mobile users' experience is as good as possible, regardless of how strong their internet connection is and other things like that. One of the other really cool things that was like pioneered by progressive web apps, but you can use it on any web app, is the idea of background tasks. So if you lose internet connection, a person could still be doing stuff on their web app, and you might like display a little, alert saying, hey, you don't have a good internet connection, but we'll resync as soon as you do. And then once it is resynced, everything that they were doing in the app still gets synced up. So like, you're in your underground secret club in the basement somewhere, and you're like, doing things with the app there. I don't know what you do, and then all that activity from playing Dungeons and Dragons down there or whatever is then loaded up into the cloud once you emerge from the basement. So it's kind of cool. I think the big lesson I learned from this adventure in progressive web apps and all this is try to make use of these features as best as possible. And I guess this kind of leads into one of the other things I wanted to show was, as you're deciding, like, okay, how much should I lean on this feature? Like this is falls into the native app type feature that might not be supported on all devices. Well, how do I know how widely it's supported? And there's a couple of good tools. So if this MDN web docs list all the browser APIs, and from something that every web developer uses, which is the fetch API. This is how you make a request to your backend from your front end when you're using, whether you just use fetch or whether you use Axios or something else. So something as universal as this to more to something newer, which is like VR in the browser. So, that's maybe not so supported. Let's see if it's where. So there's a compatibility chart on this website for each of the features, so you can kind of see where it's supported or not. And then this other website, Can I Use, is a little more wide-ranging. So it has the browser APIs, but you can also like check out like CSS Flexbox or different things like that. But this one has a little more statistics on like, okay, well, what versions are supported, and then you can see like what percentage of users in the world. So global, 70% of users could have that. And then you can, drop this down and just see like mobile versus desktop, and get a little bit more information.
Is browser support the #1 thing holding progressive web apps back right now? I know you said that they're not quite there yet, or is there something else going on with it?
I would say it's browser support, and then it's still pretty novel. So it's hard to, one of the big selling points of progressive web apps is that you can then give a native app experience without needing to go through the gatekeepers of Apple and Google. However, to get all of those progressive web app features on your Apple and Google devices, you need Apple and Google to support it on their browsers. So there's still gatekeepers on it, which is frustrating. But eventually, hopefully these things, there's an openness to it anyways. Like, so that things are as available as they are with like GPS. GPS is on every device, I think. Seems like a safe thing to say. Really? Okay. Anyway.
Quick question.
Yeah.
When you do the app like shell way of a progressive web app, because that is what I was using in my like non-technical mind to like understand what a PWA is. So when you do the shell thing where there's like an icon on my phone's home screen, and when I click that, it's going to open and it feels like it's native, even though it's just running in a web browser. Is that like, since you're not getting that from the app store, would you get that from a website? And that, sorry if this question is basic or just dumb, but if I were to download a PWA that's going to do the shell thing on my phone, so I have the icon on my home screen, I click it, it opens up, it feels native, but it's actually just in a web browser. How am I installing that on my phone, or am I installing that on my phone? Or like, if I'm a company that has one of those, do I need to like tell my users that they need to download this APK and like ignore Android yelling at them for installing an APK, or like, how does that work?
So come on. All right, let's see if it's on. So I forget which browsers do what, but if you have it set up, there should be on some browsers, there's a thing that pops up here that you can just like save it to your desktop. And then on other, it's in the settings, like the ... or whatever, and you can just like save it to your desktop. The other way that makers of progressive web apps do it is that you can just trigger that dialog by having a button on your app, say like, install to home screen, and then it'll pop it up. And then to make things more confusing, you can technically publish a PWA to the Play Store in some way, but not to the App Store. But I didn't delve into that too much.
Okay, cool. And yeah, that I guess the dumb part of my question was the APK, because if it's just a web app, you don't need to install anything. But it does make sense that you could have a button on your website that says like save to home screen, and then it'll give you the little like branded icon, and then every time you click it, it just opens up like in a browser, but it feels native on your phone.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I should have had one on here. Oh, the birds are back.
Quick question: If I have several of these, do you know how similar the resource footprint is to like Electron desktop apps? Are each having their own instance of the browser, or does that question make sense?
Like how?
Like if I've installed 3 progressive web apps, and open them up, are they each a separate instance of whatever browser is running them, or there's somehow tabs in the same instance, but I don't see that?
Like you create multiple instances of the same progressive web app?
No, if I have 3 different ones, right? Because like the shell thing we're talking about, like I don't see the browser Chrome, I don't see the browser tabs, I don't see the URL bar, right? So is that wrapper like how an Electron app is running Chrome behind the scenes, and if I open up 3 Electron apps, I've got 3 instances of Chrome gobbling up resources on my desktop. Is this similar to that or different than that?
I don't know the answer, to be honest. If I think where the resources would be taken up or not would kind of depend on kind of how the progressive web app is designed. Like it could be super minimal. Like if they're not storing anything in local cache and not using much anything, then it'd be little more than basically a link to a website, which would, But I as for whether it's like opening 3 whole separate Chrome processes, which would be bad, I don't know. One other thing I wanted to mention about when you are working on adding these native touches to your app, you're probably used to pulling up your dev tools and dropping that button, and then testing how it looks on your different size devices. That's great for screen size. It does not do anything for the native app features. It's an emulator, and it doesn't do, so it won't pull up the share icon. So to be able to test those share icons, or to test the browser API stuff while you're developing locally, you need to use something like Nginx. Nginx opens up a tunnel to your local host, And what's great about it is that okay, so if you go to this website right now, it'll give you the same experience as if you're hitting a real secure website, even though this maps to my locally running version of this app, which is not secure. And this is important because not only do you need to test the browser APIs on a real device, on a real mobile device, it also needs to be running over HTTPS for almost all of them, for security reasons. So this Nginx free, it's great. It's also just a great tool if you're working on something locally and you want like somebody who's not as tech savvy and can't like spin up a local environment. If you want to demo something real quick before you like put something into a staging environment, you can just spin up Nginx, send them the URL, and then they can click around with you and get an idea of what's going on. So that's kind of an indispensable tool for when you're developing. Yes. All right. Well, we kind of been doing Q&A. And so what else we got?
Did you want to do the GPS stuff? Did we do it?
Okay. So I thought another way that would be cool to stamp is by location. So, maybe it's, not an interactive thing. Maybe it's like going to Cleveland landmarks or something. So if you get close enough to it, then you could stamp. So, oops, that's right. Wrong one. All right, so I changed Banter Beer and Wine to be my address so that this would work for the demo. But don't come here, I'm not that good of a cook. So I have, map feature, and I have a little icon thrower myself, a little icon for there. Distance is 0.002 from my own house, which is nice. So I'm close enough. And let's get that confetti. Yay. But if we were, say, we're looking to get our stamp at Collision Bend, it shows that you're still 10 miles away. And then I have a little update location button for that. And great stuff with GPS. I used Google Maps. It looks very Google Mappy. There are there's one main alternative that with many different implementations, which is like Open Map. And there's like a cool library for that called Leaflet. But to get going real fast, Google Maps is super easy to use. And yeah, so to figure out the distance, you do all this, which That was totally plagiarized. But it's kind of fun when you look at it because it's like all this like, you know, Euclid geometry, fun stuff with like a globe and distances. But it's also just right there available for you on Google's developer documentation. So this was kind of fun to make this map stuff. I'd never done any geolocation stuff in a web app, and it's always something I'd wanted to do. And it was very easy to do. You can see all the, let's see, another fun library with the GPS was the clusters. So on here, you know, if you have too many locations that are too close, rather than like having a bunch of pins just smashed together, it has this little bubble, and then you click it, and it zooms in a level, and then explodes the bubbles. And that was fun to implement. And then having, you know, a little person icon to show where they are, I thought was nice. Don't get that on the Cleveland Brewery passport. So
Is the geolocation API doing that for you, or was that something you implemented yourself?
What's that?
What the clusters there?
The clusters is another library. Yeah.
Okay.
So
David, how many hours you got into this app?
yeah, a lot.
Seems like it. And I was just curious, like what measures like Apple and Google might be taking to like derail this whole movement. You kind of touched on it earlier, but
Well, I would say they're pretty good at it because the progressive web app, like the idea was something that Steve Jobs said 12 years ago when he was alive, because he doesn't talk much anymore, where he was like, oh, we could make a web app with native feel. And then I think the first time it got the progressive web app moniker was about 6 years ago. And if you think about other things that have been around that long or so, like I think Kubernetes is 8 years old. Swift UI is less than 6 years old. You know, you hear about these other technologies way more, and then you see progressive web apps out there. However, I think if you're looking for ways to, if you have like if you're looking for performance improvements and user experience improvements, you can kind of delve into this progressive web app universe of features and do some really cool things. One of the things I wanted to do was was get this to use the cache first kind of design, and that way people could look at these maps and could have info on restaurants and have all this available, even if when they're at the restaurant and it's, you know, a Faraday cage and they have no access whatsoever to their to the internet. So having this stuff stored offline, and I think you could do some good user education stuff, like, hey, make sure to click this link because this is going to store everything offline, or, you know, put up a banner that says you don't have good internet connection, but these features are still available, and gray out features that need that direct connection to the server. So yeah, it opens it up. I think the big block, the big eye-opening thing for me was like, it doesn't need to be this like progressive web app that goes on somebody's phone to have all these things that are open and available to you without needing to like be installed on somebody's phone.
I think at the beginning of your presentation, when you said the 30% rule for Google and Apple, I think you probably hit the nail on the head right there, because I'm pretty sure with progressive web apps, that makes it so that you can completely go around that rule for any app you download using a progressive web app, because it could just change things like we split.
Yep. Yeah, and that's definitely probably why there's been resistance to it. But you might find out that the things that you thought were only available to a native app are actually pretty well supported for your user base. And that's the other thing. Like, if you build a web app and you start seeing who's using your web app, and you see that, like, 90% of your users are Android users, and using a rather new version of the OS, you might have like everything you wished you had in a native app already available to you, and then you can do all the things that are great about a web app with, releasing every single day or whatever. Not paying the 30%, not having to get approval and waiting 2 weeks before you can put your first MVP out there. Any
Have
other questions?
you delved into any usage of WebAssembly for things like this?
No, I like so that's one of those things that, like, every time I stumble upon a blog talking about that, or somebody makes a mention of it, it's like, wow, go make one. So as a Python person, there is some WebAssembly stuff with Python, especially in the like scientific Python realm, to be able to do some machine learning stuff in the browser. So I haven't gone into that. Somebody in Cleveland Tech Slack was talking about building out some WebAssembly stuff using Rust, but if that looks exciting, if that comes. For those who are new to the idea of or haven't heard the term WebAssembly, it's basically the idea of a way for languages like Python or .NET or Java or Rust, or these typical backend languages, being able to be run in the browser. So it's instead of JavaScript. So I'm not sure exactly of the mechanism that gets it. I don't know if the Python is transpiled into JavaScript or it's something in between that. But that's an interesting technology too. That it's like, is that going to be one that that becomes super popular or not? Like,
not to get too off topic, and I'm sorry if this isn't like if you wouldn't know offhand, but on the subject of WebAssembly, is WebAssembly like a component of something like Blazor, or do they just perform similar functions? Like, if that question makes sense.
what's Blazor?
Blazor is it's newer Microsoft front end that allows you to like do front end single page application stuff in C# rather than like JavaScript. So it sounds similar, like in terms of what they actually do. Again, it might not be super relevant. I just didn't know if they worked like together or if they're just separate things describing similar similar processes.
Sounds similar in spirit. Like, something about WebAssembly that's like specifically different is like it's Python in the browser, whereas Blazor and things like that are, you write them in Blazor, and then at some point in the process it gets turned into JavaScript, and then it's just running JavaScript.
So for WebAssembly, there's two different versions of it. You can compile it to JavaScript, or you can compile it to an intermediate language called WASM. And in the intermediate language, it's going to be about 90% as efficient as regular compiled code in the browser, versus your JavaScript, which is not as fast.
Right. Okay. And that's the key difference. Thanks, Ian. Because that's why people are getting excited in the Python world about being able to like do some of this machine learning stuff directly in the browser, because it would be performant, whereas JavaScript is not as.
Thank you for entertaining my somewhat random tangent, guys.
So I've never built a native app before, but I can imagine that they would have their own like a third party that you're deploying through as well. Would you say that deployment would be an advantage a progressive web app would have over a native app, because you can kind of use your own pipeline and do things however you want?
Yeah, so I mean, the deployment advantages are that you just have one build process rather than two, and you don't need to send it to the app store. It's available over the internet. But you can build. I mean, my company uses a third party for our build processes for our native app, but I don't think we necessarily need to use them. I'm sure we could create a pipeline in Jenkins that would build our stuff. But I'm not a mobile developer, and I'm not like twice or three times failed React Native developer. So I'm not an expert in the build process there.
Does anyone have any other questions?
What's the easiest way of storing cache for the native app? Did we go over that function? I'm sorry, I missed it if we did.
For a native app?
Yeah, for the progressive web app, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Well, the progressive web app it has the same. It has the options available of using, the same options as a regular web app. So, what's nice is you could store stuff in session storage, or you could store stuff. There's also like an actual database, a full-on, SQL type database that you can use. So it's up to you as the developer when you're designing your web app as to which storage you're going to take advantage of.
Gotcha.
I have another question. Is my mic better this time though?
Yeah.
Yes, you sound crystal clear.
Okay. So I think Will kind of said something along these lines in the chat, but we've been talking about mobile, but this works for desktop stuff too, or like Windows running on a tablet, right?
You're talking about progressive web apps or just web?
Yeah.
Instances?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just browsers. So.
Okay.
Oh, I haven't been looking at the chat at all, so apologies if anyone asked me something there.
I think I got most of them.
Okay.
I think someone earlier had a question on that first chart, comparing the web apps to mobile or something. And it was, they were asking on that chart how much of it is server versus desktop apps. That like line graph chart thing you had.
Oh, it's all just web traffic, so it's all web apps. So I mean, I guess, it wasn't really talking about this chart.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it'd be web apps.
It's just web apps, web traffic.
Cool. All right. Anyone else Does anyone else have a question? No? All right,
I
cool.
have,
Oh, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I have a quick answer to a couple questions, and not because I knew this, because I Googled it, because I was curious. To Sean's question, yes, it does create a process with an ID and task manager if you're running it in Windows. It's not actually the progressive web app, it's a service worker that is the place where all the stuff's getting stored that creates that PID ID. And to Mark's question, you can check to see if you have progressive web apps by going to like Chrome://apps, or in fact, maybe it's different in different browsers, but they're browser-based installations, so you can check them there. So you can see what you have missing all over your phone, all the ones you accidentally installed. And I am told that there is a way to install these without the user knowing.
Interesting.
Do you know, Matt, are those service worker processes, I imagine, are lighter weight than like the full Chrome process that an Electron app starts?
Oh, yeah. So it's not like running Chromium. So like we do a lot with Selenium and stuff like that, where we're, you know, kind of web testing, which again would be a great way to do Selenium with emulators to do what he was saying before, how you can't see native features and whatnot. But yeah, they shouldn't be as extensive. So you're only opening up the cache. But what happens is that service worker ends up making all your calls for you, right? So it's doing a lot of your API hits for you and kind of controlling the flow of traffic a little more than just the DOM itself. So the reason why I know a little bit about it is because we're looking for that experience where, hey, I'm about to get on an airplane, but I have a whole bunch of stuff that I need to do for my job while I'm flying. So if I log on to my progressive web app or just go to the site, the progressive web app could download, you know, a basic set of instructions and all the things I need to get through my one-page app while I'm on the plane. And then when I get back, you know, I could finalize, I could have everything all set up and do all my work and then click save to the cloud or whatever when I land and have internet again. So that's why, you know, this stuff is interesting to me, or has been a work-related topic for us. But yeah, it is not a full instance of Chrome, but it does have its own PID ID, to the best of my knowledge. So it's like it folds up under your native Chrome. You'll see, like, you know, if you fold up Chrome, you'll see like 7. It's not really instances, but 7 separate service workers underneath of it.
Awesome, thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for presenting. This was really cool.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for all you spending the evening here.